Summertime is a popular season, and for good reason. Days are longer as well as hotter, making it a good idea to go outside for an adventure. City streets are filled with the jeers of youngsters and overflowing fire hydrants. The overworked find brief respite through trips in the works for even a year in advance. It truly is a season of pure energy and good vibes. That is, until the world came to a halt like a wrench in a machine, and that wrench is a highly contagious disease. The frightening possibilities of the situation getting out of hand led to new standards being placed. None we've ever believed to be normal, even as recent as a year ago. Schools were moved entirely online at the mercy of none other than the gaming chat app Discord. Restaurants transitioned to a takeout only business model, and worldwide cities like Manhattan became desolate for the first time since the 1980s. Thankfully, things have eased up a bit, but we're still far from the life we once knew. Another thing that has been taken from us is also what we usually love about summer: adventures, connections, and of course, summer vacation. This is my personal story about vacationing in the new normal. Since we were landlocked to the United States, we had to make the best of what we got. Our path led us slightly northward to New England, as it's a place new to me and my family. As another added benefit, those states happen to have a quarantine exception for visitors from New York. For half our time out, we went to Boston, then spent the rest of our time in Maine for the other half, specifically the towns of Bangor
It's
and
a
Bar Harbor,
rock.
as well as the city of Portland. Day 1. Once the power on our block came back, right after Tropical Storm Isaias passed, we shipped off to Boston. Since we were visiting the city during the new normal, we had to compromise with certain activities, while a list of events such as concerts and organized gatherings were axed. So what did we do for most of our trip? We ate. A lot. We started off our vacation in the nearby Chinatown in downtown Boston, and had the traditional New England meal of ramen. Still disoriented because we were in a new city after hours of travel. Thankfully, the shop handlers in this corner of Boston's Chinatown were generous and gave us 4 water bottles even if we only ordered 2. Even if the ramen was pricey and nothing to write home about, it was only our first evening in the city, and first impressions don't mean everything. After that meal, night fell, and we ducked into our hotel room with a pretend version of Boston on the light fixture, watching the mayor of Flavortown give his speeches on television. This is another thing about the new normal. Everything closes much earlier, and night becomes more dangerous thanks to a decreased number of people outside thanks to less activities, not to mention less security detail on the streets. But no matter, it was soon to be a new day. When I woke up the next day, I went off to see how Boston's public transportation stacked up to New York's, and I found it to be interestingly similar. For one, when I stepped into the tunnel, the humidity and hot air pushed out by the trains made me feel like home. The card stations were similar to the ones in the Big Apple, but they actually charged more for a ride than here, and they called their tickets Charlie cards rather than Metro cards. Now, let me tell you how their system works. The thing is, there's color-coded lines, but that's about it. The tracks can fork, so what you need to look for is the destination of your train, not a sole numerical or alphabetical label. It's like how the MTA A line can either go to Lefferts Boulevard or Far Rockaway, despite both being blue. I do admit that their cars are a lot more well designed than the ones in Big Apple. Their seats are similar in material to bus seats. Their turnstiles are also well designed for people with huge bags or wheelchairs to pass through, as well as harder to hop over, although I bet a determined New Yorker would still find a way. Soon enough, I ended up on the other side of the Charles River, which I found out was a separate territory from Boston, Cambridge. It was lunchtime, and I landed on the All-Star Sandwich Bar. It has a nice ring to it, and right across the street is a pizza bar of the same brand. It was a fine local business which wears its individuality on its sleeves. There were a lot of sandwiches on the menu, but I went for the Atomic Meatloaf Meltdown, which features a slice of homemade meatloaf, onion jam, and hot sauce. It was a good yet salty lunch, and the waiters were always checking on me to see if everything's in order. Nice food and kind service, not to mention that it was partially open due to the new standards. So I definitely recommend this place. A few points off because of the Pickle Rick drawing on the window though. After that, I made my way down Cambridge and saw the closed Dante Alighieri Italian Cultural Center when I walked past MIT. The day's beauty showed itself in full bloom when I crossed the Charles River to see people sailing, kayaking, and jogging in the sunlight, which is a fine glimpse of a pre-pandemic summer. Over time, I made my way to Boston's North End and felt a little bit more at home. This area was like my hometown of Little Italy in the Bronx. Mike's Pastries specifically reminded me of bakeries such as Madolier Brothers back home. However, I was in Boston to taste Boston, so I ordered a Boston cream pie, which, as it turns out, isn't like a pie at all. It's more like a cake. The line was surprisingly shorter than I imagined, and I came in knowing that this specific bakery is popular with tourists. Another spot that tourists have heard about is the Boston Public Market, which is in between Boston's North End and West End. The produce there is actually really cheap, so if you're a fan of cooking with legumes, this is the place to go in a summer afternoon. Contrary to popular belief, they do not, however, have rotisserie chicken. Greetings. Do you have any rotisserie chicken?
Huh?
Rotisserie chicken. Okay, thanks. A different area of Boston that would usually attract a crowd in the old normal is Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox, or as we've come to know them, the Yankee fans' natural enemy. That day, the Red Sox were playing for a televised game for an empty live crowd because, well, I'll let this picture show you. The next day, I focused on seeing the historical sites in Boston, and one can do that for free and in current conditions by walking the Freedom Trail. It starts on the Boston Common in downtown Boston and ends across the river in Charlestown. There are plenty of guided overlays in Google Maps, but I figured out near the end of the trail that there's a red line that marks the trail on the sidewalks so you won't get lost. I won't go over the entire trail because I like to keep a bit of mystery for anyone who would like to visit, as well as to prevent boring you to death. But my favorite sites include the Old State House, which was the site of the Boston Massacre in 1770, which is close to the Faneuil Hall, where the first town meeting of U.S. history happened. An interesting digression is right behind the historical site is a modern marketplace with eateries and shops. There's a Regina Pizzeria, the official pizza of the Red Sox, which wasn't anything to write home about, to be honest. And they also had a Dick's Last Resort at one point, but it was abandoned when I checked. For those out of the know, Dick's is a novelty restaurant where people come just to be treated meanly by the waiters, hence the name. Going on through the trail, I ended up back in the north end of Boston. Close to Mark's Pastries is none other than the American Revolutionary icon Paul Revere's house. But I can't tell you how authentic it is, as it costs admission to enter, and I had suspicions of a tourist trap. But free to see, close by, is the Old North Church, the site of Paul Revere's candlelight signal that the British were coming. 1 light if by land and 2 if by sea. The trail ends with a Washington Monument-looking structure, which marks the Battle of Bunker Hill, where soldiers were told to conserve their ammo by the iconic saying, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." From there, we were done with our last full day in Boston. I met up with my brother to have an evening munch at Boston Burger Company.
It looks good. I'm gonna have a heart attack. Good stuff.
So we decided to go to Boston Burger Company. But he called again. The other place wasn't too far, but hopefully. The next day we were on our way out, but not without checking out the Boston Common and its nearby garden. Close by is the end of the Boston Marathon, which ends on this exact line in Copley Square. And that's another thing. Running is very much prevalent in this city's culture. Throughout my 3 days there, I came across many joggers. It makes sense, the city isn't organized on a grid like New York, but rather shaped by the nearby waters. To go far, you're really gonna have to leg it. It seems that this activity is also their symbol of strength, as after their tragic attack in 2013, their response was to run even more marathons in solidarity. Although the new normal made vacationing much harder, I would say that Boston was my favorite part of the entire trip, and that may be because of the city's perseverance. It may not exactly be New York, but it's different in a charming New England way, especially in its locals and rich history. I'd like to thank you again for watching, even if I've been in and out. Rest assured, part 2 is in the works. No matter how much weirder this year gets, I hope you keep standing tall, and I'll be seeing you.